Okay, so we're going to get started here. I just wanted to walk through the very basic setup of this MyMedia REST API backend that I created, and just kind of wanted to show you at least how to get it set up. So the first thing you're going to want to do is log into GitHub, and then go to my AA Little page, and you should see a repository called MyMedia. It's public, but it's, there's not a lot in here, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. So here are the files in my MyMedia project, and then hopefully a nice README file that we can just sort of walk through each of the steps to get set up. So I'm going to assume that you have Git and Python installed in your machine. I think you probably should. To prove that, I guess you can just do a git -- version, and that proves that. And then we can do Python -- version, and that's installed, of course. So I think those should be all set up on your Mac anyway. And we should be good to go. So if we do a git clone on the URL, this is just a command that basically pulls down the repository from the central GitHub server and gets it local on your machine. So it's just going to copy that straight down. So off we go. Then the next thing you're going to do is just change into the MyMedia directory. So we'll do a cd MyMedia. Okay, and then we'll list the files there, and you see there's a README file, a MyMedia folder with all the guts of the application, and then a requirements file. We'll get to that in a minute. So next up, I think you might have to sudo the easy install of pip. So just run that under super user, just in case. I think you might need to. Now it's going to run really quickly for me because I already have pip installed. What pip is an installer for the rest of the dependencies that we need for the project. So it's just a really easy way of getting parts of the project installed in your machine in a really convenient way. So the first thing we're going to use pip to do is install virtual environment. So virtual environment is this, again, it's going to run really quickly on my machine because I have it already, but virtual environment is basically so that we can sort of get virtual environment running in this terminal window, and then everything I install henceforward, once I have it set up and running, is just kind of installed in that virtual environment and isn't actually installed on my machine. So I won't, if I install stuff of a certain version for this particular project, I can do it in the virtual environment, and then I won't break other projects that I might be using that would have, or I might be building that have different dependencies. So I think the best practice is fire up a virtual environment every time you want to do some work on a particular project so you don't break others. So that's what we'll do. So the first thing we'll do is just do, I've got a little bit of a typo here. You don't want the tilde slash here. So we're just going to do a make dir on the for an environment folder. So that'll just create that environment folder. Then we need to actually tell virtual env to go ahead and sort of create a deeper folder structure for our actual application. So again, I have to clean up the commands here a little bit, but we'll use environment MyMedia. Okay, and that's going to create a bunch of stuff underneath that MyMedia folder, which is great. And then basically this source command is just starting the environment itself. So MyMedia, bin, and activate. Okay, and that's just going to get it started. And then you see that your command line is actually prefixed with brackets MyMedia. And that's kind of just an indicator that says, hey, you are running that MyMedia virtual environment. So now anything you install, don't worry about it, you're just doing it in the context of that virtual environment. So that's great. Now we're going to do this bigger command, which is pip install requirements. But before I do that, I want to show you what the requirements file holds. So here's the requirements file, and basically it's really simple text file that just shows you what's the part that you're going to install. So in this case it's Django, and you're going to install 1.5 version. Okay, pigments, I don't even think I needed that, but it's installed. South, a bunch of these things, but it's just a nice listing of all the dependencies that you'll need for the project all in one little place. And then so you can just do pip install requirements, and it'll just walk through that requirements file and install everything you need there, which is really handy. So this is, again, you just created this little virtual environment that you needed. You've got this requirements file on the side that you just basically call pip install on. It'll walk through it, install everything you need, and then you're good to go. So it's just a nice way of getting the machine set up, perfect state for this project without a whole lot of worrying about breaking other stuff in your machine. And if you've ever used Ruby on Rails, you probably went with a similar approach, because you can end up with the same kind of issues that the virtual environment was attempting to solve for. And also, I think a gem file would be the analogy for the requirements.txt file. Okay, so that's just going to run a little bit longer. Next up, what we're going to do is actually start to build out the database. So I haven't checked in an instance of the database because I figured each developer will want to create their own instance of the database. So that is a Python command that'll get us started there. So once we're once we have all the dependencies installed, then we can start with that. Okay, cool. So we're good to go. Next up, again, is that syncdb call, and that's going to actually create some of the basic tables, get you kind of set up and going, and then it's going to ask you to create a user, so you should probably do that. So I'll say, yeah, I want to do that, and I want to accept the default username, AA little, and then I'll enter in my email address. Okay, and then a password for the user. Confirm the password, and now you're good to go, and you have a base user in the database. Now, I've got migration scripts already because it took me a few steps to actually build out this project. So syncdb just kind of gets you the basic startup, and then the next step, the migration scripts will run, and that'll get me the full database instance all set up and going. Okay. Final step is basically to have run server execute. So I will do that on port 8080. So Python's going to spin up a little server, and it's going to run it at localhost 8080. So if I flip over to here and I just refresh, you're going to see that the root API now is a fully functioning REST API endpoint. And this is just a beautiful kind of browsable API that you can utilize. Actually, just exposed an issue. What I need to do is first log in to get access to these endpoints. So I'll do that with the test user account that I created in one of the previous steps. If I log in, now if I go to users, you should be able to see AA little, so that's the one user. Go back to API root, and we could even start entering in media for this guy. So some movie, rating of 3. I watched it, it's a movie, and I post. Cool. So now if I wanted to just look at the medium list, then there you go. AA little is the owner. He finished a movie called Some Movie. So that's getting the back end basically up and running. I think there's also, forgot to test this, but I think there's an admin portal that you should be able to get access to. Ah, there it is, great. So just with the admin, you're already logged in. What this is basically just almost kind of a content management system for everything in the database. So you could go in and create new users here because you're a super user, you can do that. You can go a bunch of OAuth stuff that's actually turned off right now, so that's not actually useful. And for whatever reason, I am not seeing the media stuff. Is that under sites? No. So I'll have to figure that out actually, and why I'm not seeing that. But I should be able to see the media list as well. But that's Django, and there's not a lot of code that backs that, but I'll walk through that in a separate video or walkthrough. Thanks.